This is Robert Kraft, and I'm coming to you live on SNNLive, and we're here at the 2016 LD Micro Invitational in Bel Air, California. With me right now is Hadley Ford from iAnthus Capital Management. It's a private company. Hadley, welcome to SNNLive.
Thank you, Robert. Happy to be here.
I'm happy to have you. So, for our audience that may not know the iAnthus story yet, let's get a company overview first, and then we'll go from there.
Okay, iAnthus Capital Management provides capital for licensed operators in the cannabis space in the United States. So if you're an entrepreneur who is fortunate enough to have a license, you may not have access to capital to start your business, to grow your business, or to buy out a partner. There is no regular way institutional capital available in the market, and we're one of the few providers of that type of solution. The cannabis market in the United States is a $50 billion retail market. That's moving from black to white at this point. So you're moving from a $50 billion black market to a $50 billion white market. It's about 10% penetration at this point. About $5 or $6 billion of revenue are legal at this juncture. Because of the anomaly within the United States that the state regulations have allowed cannabis to be legal at the state level, and the federal government has continued to not change the schedule of the drug. Most of your usual providers of capital, your Citibanks, Goldman Sachs, KKRs of the world, aren't writing checks for entrepreneurs. So you have this strange situation where an entrepreneur has been fortunate enough to work hard and win a license, but then doesn't have access to money. Unless they have a very strong Rolodex or a rich aunt or uncle, they're out of luck. And we step in and fill that capital gap for them.
So, where did this idea come from? I mean, you kind of went over it a little bit, but what's the history of the company? How did you guys get started in doing this?
Well, my background is one of banking, finance, and healthcare. So I started off as a research analyst at Fidelity in the 80s, and I worked at Goldman Sachs through most of the 90s on the principal investing side and the corporate finance side. In the early part of the 2000s, 2004 or so, I founded a healthcare company called Procure Treatment Centers, which became the largest provider of proton therapy in the world. Serendipitously, around the same time, my brother and sister were involved in cannabis. My brother is the largest medical provider of cannabis in the state of New Mexico. My sister is one of 4 licensed operators in the state of Vermont. And they didn't have access to capital. I mean, they're both successful, but it was really a bootstrap type operation. So when I left my proton company a couple of years ago, I got together with an old Goldman business associate, a fellow named Randy Maslow, who was a founder of Exo Communications, a founder of IGE, and we decided to take a look at the cannabis space. And we came up with the idea for iAnthus Capital Management because of this dearth of capital in the market. We spent the last year and a half developing the plan. We've structured a public vehicle in Canada. We should be public in 2 to 3 weeks. That will be used as a way to source money in the Canadian markets. Interestingly, the Canadian capital markets are probably 3 to 5 years ahead of the U.S. capital markets. You have about 5 to 6 public grow companies in Canada who regularly issue securities, and you've got an educated retail and small institution market in Canada that actually write checks. So you have a market where investors are writing checks and issuers are receiving capital for use in cannabis. It's the only market anywhere in the world that does that. So we thought if we could raise money publicly in Canada, educate that investor base about the opportunity in the United States, we would have regular way access to capital, which we could then put to work in support of these entrepreneurs here down in the United States. That's structured, it's ready to go. We filed with the regulators. We'll be public 2 to 3 weeks from now. We've also raised about $9 million of private capital, and we have investments in Vermont, New Mexico, and Massachusetts. We have term sheets in several other states here in the United States, and we're actively looking at projects in probably 6 or 7 other markets.
Real quick. So what's a sample deal structure look like? So let's say you raise the financing in Canada, but now you come down here. You just met Joe Smith, entrepreneur. He has his license. Now you come in. So what's the deal structure there? How does it work?
Well, we like to buy cash flow. That's how I think about it. So some of the structure is driven by state law. Some of it's driven by the way the entrepreneurs set up their company. So we're very flexible. Our ideal structure would be a preferred stock owner in a for-profit entity. But if a state really has not-for-profit regs in place and the entrepreneur set up as a not-for-profit, we'll actually do a loan with a services contract. But essentially, at the end of the day, we just want to be an owner of cash flow, and we want to help the entrepreneur with management services, advice, counsel, help them build their business.
So how do you assess a new project? I mean, I know obviously the first criteria is they got to have the license at the very least, but
well,
what
not
else?
Not necessarily.
Oh, okay.
The first thing we look at is what market are you in, because it varies widely market by market. So we want a state where you're going to have a wide number of indications available, a state that will have a broad number of ingestion methods that's allowed. And we like what I would call an oligopoly situation, so a license or potential license holder in a limited license state. So for instance, my sister in Vermont is one of 4 license holders. She doesn't necessarily have to be the best operator. I think she is, but even if she's not, she's only one of 4. So we look for situations like that. We also look for market share leaders in a very competitive market. So you look at a market where my brother is in New Mexico. There's probably, I think there was originally 23 license holders. I think there's probably in the mid-30s right now, but he's a market share leader. He's the number 1 guy in the state. He's proven. That's the type of person we like to back. So it will always start with the entrepreneur, like who is our partner and how we're going to work with them. Now that can manifest itself in a number of ways. It can be an existing operation. It can be an entrepreneur who's doing a license application, in which case we'll give them a contingent term sheet that if they win a license, we'll back and support them. Or it might be someone who actually needs growth capital, or in some instances, maybe someone's doing, has a partner who doesn't want to be a partner anymore. So we'll actually buy out the partner. So we'll use our capital in support of an entrepreneur in many different ways.
So, as I can imagine, there's many challenges in entering the cannabis space. What are some of the challenges that you foresee with this business model?
Well, it depends on which day you're going to ask me. There's basically 2 things that we do. We raise capital and we put that money to work, which then also implies that you have to have a great team in the middle doing that. And we've actually spent a lot of time building that team. I think it would look very familiar to someone who's familiar with the financial markets. We have people out of Citibank, Carlyle, JP Morgan. I'm out of Goldman Sachs. So we've got reformed bankers and reformed lawyers who are actually doing the diligence and doing the work. That's the key part. That team drives it. So now you've got to feather in the 2 pieces. You need to get capital and you need to put it to work. So you don't want to raise too much capital and have dead money on your balance sheet. You don't want to make too many commitments and not have an ability to finance those. So depending on which day you ask me, I'm going to have a different issue. Some days, money's the issue. The other days, finding the right project is the issue.
And then, of course, legally, on the legal side of things, with the legal cannabis being on the docket in many states, and with being in an election year, how does all of that affect your business?
Well, I think the overall change in regulations is really a rock that's rolling downhill, right? So you've got 24, 25 states now that have full medical programs, at least at the legislative level. You've probably got another 15 or 16 that have CBD available in some form or fashion. You've got 4 states that are full rec, and it's probably another half dozen are considering it this fall. So I think that is just moving in that direction, and I think that plays to our benefit. Obviously, the more broadly accepted cannabis is from a regulatory perspective, the more people are going to need capital and the more potential partners we'll have. I think on a federal level, still Schedule I drug, that's kept all your usual providers of capital on the sidelines. That's beneficial to us. I think that'll change much more slowly. My view is the federal government will lead from behind, as it were, and let the states take the lead along this, and that works very fine for us for the next 3 to 5 years.
So I know we talked a little bit about competition in the sense that, there's, in the U.S. at least, there's no institutions that are doing exactly what you're doing yet. But I'm curious, at least in Canada, is this model exist yet, or are you?
This model doesn't exist anywhere yet. It's somewhat surprising, given the what I see as a tremendous opportunity. You have a $50 billion market that essentially has no banking. If this was a regular way industry, you'd have 5,000, 6,000 competitors writing checks and coming up with balance sheet solutions in some form or fashion. I don't foresee that changing rapidly anytime in the near future. Most of our competition would be family offices or an individual entrepreneur's Rolodex. And, there's access to capital. Obviously, there's thousands of entrepreneurs who've built out their businesses. But it's interesting, when you peel back the statistics a little bit, you'll see that upwards of 80% of entrepreneurs have actually used their savings to start their business. And we know just from some of the surveys that have been done that 50 to 60% of existing cannabis operators are looking for capital today. So there's definitely a shortage of capital, and we aim to fill that working with the top entrepreneurs in whatever market they're in.
See, what I see is like you're almost like a Canadian cannabis BDC.
Yeah,
almost. Right?
Yes.
I mean,
well, sort of. Yeah, I mean, but it's a U.S.-oriented piece. We just happen to be listed up in Canada, and that's where we'll source the capital. But you're right. I mean, it's like a BDC in that form and fashion. And, I think the minority investment pieces that we do, lend itself to that type of comparison. Although one of our projects in Massachusetts, we will be the majority owner of it. So that'll be a consolidated revenue and income statement, which keeps us from looking exactly like a BDC might.
So I'm guessing on your website you'll probably have a full list of your portfolio of who you have and under your...
We will. Once we're listed, we plan on having all of our partners up there. Right now, it's really just our core team and what our strategy is. But upon the public offering and the closing of our share exchange, all that will be up on the website.
All right. So where can our audience go and find more information about the company?
iAnthuscapital.com is probably a good place to start. You can contact us there, get on our mailing list, and we'll make sure that everyone stays up to speed on the iAnthus story.
Why is it called iAnthus, by the way?
iAnthus is the phonetic spelling of a Latin word for forever flowering. That was my brother's brainchild. I have to give him complete credit for that one.
My name is Robert Kraft, and I'm coming to you live on SNNLive. And we're here at the 2016 LD Micro Invitational in Bel Air, California. With me again has been Hadley Ford from iAnthus Capital Management. It's a private company. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Robert.